I never thought a single glass of wine would ruin my life. But then again, I never thought my own mother would try to kill me. My name is Meera Sharma. I'm an architect, or at least I was before everything fell apart. 3 months ago, I was standing in the middle of my engagement party, dressed in a deep red lehenga, laughing with my fiancé Rohan, surrounded by family and friends. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. The lights were warm, the music soft, and the air smelled like roses and expensive perfume. My mother, elegant in her silk sari, had been unusually affectionate all evening, kissing my forehead, adjusting my jewelry, whispering how proud she was. At the time, I thought it was just emotion. Now, I know better. She approached me with 2 glasses of red wine, her smile serene. "For my daughter," she said, pressing one into my hand. "A toast to your future." I took it, but the moment the scent hit me, my skin prickled. It was too bitter, too sharp. Not like the expensive Cabernet we'd been serving all night. I hesitated, swirling the dark liquid. "Ma, this smells different." Her smile didn't waver. "It's imported, Beta. Special. Just for you." Something in her eyes to steady. Too calm made my fingers tighten around the stem. Before I could overthink it, my younger sister Priya bounded over, her laughter ringing. "Didi, stop being suspicious," she teased, snatching the glass from my hand. "If you won't drink, I will." In a split-second decision, I let her take it. "Fine." I laughed, swapping it with hers. "But only because you're stealing all my luck." "Tonight anyway." We clinked glasses. I took a small sip of hers, sweet, normal. Priya, always dramatic, downed half of mine in one gulp. Then everything went wrong. Her smile froze. Her eyes widened, confused, then panicked. Her hands flew to her throat. Didi. She choked out. "It burns." The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. She collapsed. Screams erupted. Someone yelled for an ambulance. Rohan rushed forward, catching Priya before her head hit the ground. My mother stood completely still, her face pale, not screaming, not crying, just staring. And in that moment I knew the wine wasn't just off. It was poisoned, and it was meant for me. The hospital lights were too bright, too sterile. They made everything feel like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Priya lay motionless on the bed, tubes snaking from her arms, machines beeping in a rhythm that felt more like a countdown than a reassurance. I couldn't stop staring at her face, the way her lips had turned slightly blue, the way her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. She looked so small. My mother sat in the corner, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression unreadable. She hadn't cried, not once. Not when the paramedics had rushed Priya into the ambulance. Not when the doctors had said the words acute poisoning. Not even when they'd asked, voice heavy with implication, was there anything unusual she consumed? I had answered for her. The wine. She drank my wine. My mother's eyes had flickered to me then, just for a second. Something dark and unspoken passed between us before she looked away. Rohan had been pacing the hallway outside, talking in hushed tones on his phone. Every time I caught a glimpse of him through the glass door, his jaw was clenched tight, his fingers running through his hair in agitation. When he finally came back inside, he sat beside me, pulling me into his arms. "She's going to be okay," he murmured into my hair. I wanted to believe him, but all I could think about was the way my mother had handed me that glass, the way she'd watched me with those calm, expectant eyes drink it. I pulled away from Rohan, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to my mother." He hesitated, then nodded. She didn't look up when I approached, just kept staring at the floor, her back straight, her sari perfectly unwrinkled. "Ma," I said. "Nothing." "Ma." This time. She lifted her head. Her eyes were dry. "Why did you give me that wine?" A beat of silence. Then, so quiet I almost missed it. "I didn't." The lie was so effortless, so cold, that for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "You handed it to me," I said, my voice shaking. "You watched me take it. I gave you a glass of wine, like any mother would at her daughter's engagement," she interrupted, her tone steady. If something was wrong with it, that isn't my fault. I recoiled. Not her fault. Priya was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life, and she was already distancing herself, already covering her tracks, before I could say anything else. A doctor walked in, his face grim. "We've identified the toxin," he said. "It's a concentrated dose of aconite. Fast-acting, lethal in high quantities." He paused, glancing between us. If she'd finished the entire glass, she wouldn't have made it. The room spun. "Lethal." Rohan's hand found mine, squeezing tight. "My mother didn't move." The doctor cleared his throat. "The police will need to ask some questions. Given the circumstances, this appears to be a deliberate poisoning." My mother stood abruptly. "This is a family matter," she said, her voice sharp. "There's no need for police." The doctor frowned. "With all due respect, Mrs. Sharma, this is a criminal investigation now." Her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, I saw a crack in her composure, a flicker of fear. And that was when I knew for sure. She had done this, and she had meant for me to die. The police station smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. I sat on a hard plastic chair, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. Across from me, Inspector Rohan flipped through his notepad, his expression unreadable. He'd been asking the same questions in different ways for what felt like forever. "Did you notice anything unusual about your mother's behavior before the party? Was there any tension between you and your family recently? Do you know of anyone who might want to harm you?" Every time I answered, my voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. I told him about the wine, about how my mother had insisted I drink it, about the way she hadn't even flinched when Priya collapsed. He wrote it all down, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Who would believe a daughter accusing her own mother of attempted murder? When I finally stepped outside, the night air hit me like a slap. Rohan was waiting by his car, his phone pressed to his ear. He hung up the second he saw me, but not before I caught a glimpse of the screen. "Mama." The contact name read. His mother. He opened his arms, and I let him pull me in, but my body stayed stiff. Something about the way he'd been acting since the hospital didn't sit right with me. The hushed calls, the way he kept glancing at his phone, the way he'd been so quick to agree with my mother that the police were overreacting. "Let's go home," he murmured into my hair. I nodded, but my mind was racing. The apartment was too quiet. Rohan went to shower, and I stood in the kitchen, staring at the half-empty wine bottle from last week's dinner. My fingers traced the rim absently, then my eyes landed on his briefcase. I shouldn't have, but after everything, I couldn't stop myself. The lock clicked open easily. Inside, stacked between files, was a folder with my name on it. My breath caught. Bank statements, property papers, a life insurance policy taken out in my name 3 months ago with Rohan as the sole beneficiary. And beneath it all, a photo, a younger version of my father, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. And beside her, Rohan. My hands shook so badly the papers slipped from my grasp, because the date scrawled on the back of the photo was from 15 years ago. Long before Rohan and I had ever met. The shower turned off. I shoved everything back, but my pulse wouldn't slow down. That night, as Rohan slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, the pieces clicking together in the worst possible way. The wine, the insurance, the photo, and one terrible question. Had my engagement been a lie from the start? Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph, my father's smiling face next to a woman who looked nothing like my mother, his hand resting on a young Rohan's shoulder. The boy in the picture had the same sharp jawline, the same way of tilting his head slightly to the left when he was listening carefully. The resemblance was undeniable now that I knew to look for it. I waited until Rohan's breathing deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep before slipping out of bed. The hardwood floor was cold under my bare feet as I crept toward his study, my pulse hammering so loudly I was afraid it would wake him. The door creaked when I pushed it open, and I froze, listening for any sign that he'd stirred. When silence stretched through the apartment, I exhaled and stepped inside. Moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across his desk. I hesitated for only a second before pulling open the top drawer. Pens, paper clips, a stack of business cards. Nothing unusual. The second drawer held files, work contracts, investment portfolios. My fingers brushed against a small velvet box tucked in the back, and for a wild moment I thought it might be my engagement ring, until I remembered that was already on my finger. I lifted the lid, a silver locket. Inside, a tiny photograph of the same woman from the picture in his briefcase. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I turned it over. Engraved on the back were 2 words. For Sunita. I didn't recognize the name. The third drawer was locked. I stared at it. My throat tight. There had to be a key somewhere. I checked under the desk beneath the keyboard, even inside the empty coffee mug he kept by his computer. Nothing. I was about to give up when my gaze landed on the framed photo on his bookshelf, our engagement picture. I lifted it carefully, and there, taped to the back, was a small silver key. The drawer slid open with a quiet click. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age. The paper crackled as I unfolded it. Dearest Sunita, I can't keep lying to her. She deserves to know the truth about our son. I'm telling Priya everything tonight. The letter was signed with my father's name. The date at the top was 1 week before he died. A car honked outside, and I jumped, nearly knocking over a stack of papers. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as I stuffed everything back where I'd found it. My mind racing. Our son, Rohan, was my father's child, which meant the floorboard creaked behind me. I whirled around. Rohan stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light. He wasn't sleepy-eyed or confused. He was fully dressed, his keys in one hand, his phone in the other. He'd been awake the whole time. Looking for something? He asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. The way my mother's had been when she handed me that glass of wine. I took a step back, my legs hitting the desk. You knew, I whispered. You knew who you were this whole time. He didn't deny it, just tilted his head slightly to the left, exactly like the boy in the photograph. Mira, he said softly, you were never supposed to find out this way. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. The ordinary sounds of the city going about its night while my world shattered. I thought of Priya in the hospital, of my mother's cold eyes, of the letter in my father's handwriting. And then I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. The rain came down in sheets as I stumbled out of the apartment building, the cold water soaking through my clothes within seconds. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have my purse. Just the clothes on my back and the terrible knowledge burning through my chest like acid. I ran blindly at first, my bare feet slapping against wet pavement, not caring about the sharp stones or broken glass. The streets were nearly empty at this hour. The few people out hurrying under umbrellas, none of them looking twice at the wild-eyed woman running through the storm. It wasn't until I reached a park 3 blocks away that I stopped, collapsing onto a bench under a tree that provided little shelter. My lungs burned, my hair plastered to my face, rainwater mixing with the tears streaming down my cheeks. Our son, the words from the letter played on a loop in my head. Rohan was my father's child, my half-brother, and he'd known all along. The engagement, the love, the promises, all of it had been a lie. But why? I wiped my face with shaking hands, trying to think through the panic. The life insurance policy, the property papers, my mother's attempt to poison me. It all connected somehow, but the shape of it was still just out of reach. The hospital. I needed to see Priya. She was the only one left who might know something, who might help me make sense of this nightmare. I stood, my legs unsteady, and started walking. The hospital was nearly 2 miles away, but I didn't dare go back for my things or call a cab, not with Rohan possibly looking for me. The rain eased to a drizzle as I walked, the city slowly waking around me. Delivery trucks rumbled past, early morning workers hurried to buses, the world moving on as if mine hadn't just ended. By the time I reached the hospital, my feet were raw and bleeding, my clothes clinging to me like a second skin. The nurse at the front desk took one look at me and stood quickly. Miss, are you Priya Sharma? I interrupted, my voice hoarse. I need to see my sister. She hesitated, then nodded. Room 412. But visiting hours don't start for another. I was already moving toward the elevators. The hallway outside Priya's room was quiet. The only sound the steady beep of monitors from behind half-closed doors. I paused outside her door, suddenly afraid of what I might find. The last time I'd seen her, she'd been pale and still, her breath shallow. I pushed the door open. Priya was sitting up in bed, her face turned toward the window. She looked thinner, dark circles under her eyes, but alive. So alive, Mira. Her voice was weak but clear. I broke Dot into steps. I was at her side, clutching her hands, sobbing into the stiff hospital sheets. All the terror and confusion and betrayal poured out of me in great, heaving gasps. Priya's hands tightened around mine. What happened? I told her everything. The wine, the photograph, the letter, Rohan's face when he caught me in his study. When I finished, Priya was silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, I knew something was wrong. I lifted my head. What? She shifted painfully in the bed. A few months ago, I found Ma going through Dad's old things. She was crying. When I asked why, she said it was nothing but. She hesitated. I saw a photo fall out of the box she was holding. It was Dad with a woman and a little boy. My breath caught. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, she said, her voice breaking. The next day, I started to ask you about Dad's past, but Ma walked in and you saw how she was. She made me drop it. I thought of my mother's cold eyes at the engagement party, the way she'd handed me that glass without hesitation. She knew, I whispered. She knew who Rohan was all along. Priya nodded slowly. I think she was trying to protect you by poisoning me. The words hung between us, ugly and sharp. Priya's grip on my hand tightened. No, by stopping the wedding. A knock at the door made us both jump. I turned, expecting a nurse. Instead, Rohan stood in the doorway, his hair damp from the rain, his expression unreadable. Dot in his hand was a gun. The moment stretched like taffy, thin and brittle. The gun in Rohan's hand didn't waver. His knuckles were white around the grip, his eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. The man I'd loved, the man I'd promised to marry, looked at me now with something between regret and resolve. Priya's fingers dug into my arm. Neither of us breathed. Close the door, Rohan said quietly. I didn't move. He stepped inside and kicked it shut behind him, the click of the latch snapping like a bone breaking. Sit down, Mira. The gun wasn't pointed at us. Not exactly. It hung at his side, but the threat was clear. I lowered myself slowly into the chair beside Priya's bed, my legs shaking. You read the letter, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Anyway, he exhaled through his nose, his shoulders sagging slightly. Then you know that you're my brother? The words tasted like poison. Yes, I know. Priya made a small, wounded sound beside me. Rohan didn't look at her. His gaze stayed locked on mine. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said. Then how was it supposed to happen? My voice cracked. Were you going to tell me on our wedding night? Or wait until after you'd collected the life insurance money? His jaw tightened. You think this is about money? What else could it possibly be about? The gun twitched in his hand. For the first time, real emotion flashed across his face. Anger, hurt, something raw and ugly. It was never about the money. It was about justice. The monitors beeped steadily in the silence that followed. Priya found her voice first. What justice? Rohan finally looked at her, then back at me. Your father ruined my mother's life. He promised to leave your family, to be with us. Then he changed his mind. His thumb stroked the side of the gun absently. She never recovered, drank herself to death by the time I was 12. The rain outside picked up again, tapping against the window like impatient fingers. I shook my head. That doesn't explain why your mother knew, he interrupted. She found out about us when I was a kid, threatened to destroy my mother if she ever contacted your father again. His smile was bitter. She made good on that threat. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. The poisoned wine, my mother's coldness, the way she'd watched me so carefully that night. She wasn't trying to kill me, I whispered. She was trying to stop the wedding. Rohan's silence was confirmation enough. Priya sat up straighter, wincing at the movement. But why swap the glasses? Why not just dump it out? I knew the answer before he said it, because I needed proof, Rohan said softly. Proof that she was willing to kill her own daughter to keep this secret. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small vial of clear liquid. I switched the wine before your mother got to it. Just enough to make Priya sick. Enough to get your mother arrested. The room tilted. All this time, I'd thought my mother was the villain. But Rohan had been playing us all. You framed her, I said. He didn't deny it. Now it's your turn. The gun rose slowly, until it was pointed at my chest. You're going to call your mother, he said. You're going to tell her you know everything. And then, he smiled. The same charming smile that had made me fall for him. Then you're going to help me destroy her. The monitors beeped faster, matching my racing heart. Priya's hand found mine under the blanket, her grip desperate. I looked at the man I'd almost married, my brother, and made my decision. No, his smile faded. Mira, I won't help you. My voice didn't shake. Not after what you did to Priya. To me. Something dark flickered in his eyes. The gun steadied. Then I'll just have to do this the hard way. The door burst open. 3 police officers rushed in, guns drawn. Behind them, pale and shaking, stood my mother. Put the weapon down. The lead officer shouted. Rowan's head whipped toward them. Then, back to me. Understanding dawned on his face. You called them. While we'd been talking, while he'd been monologuing, I'd pressed the emergency call button hidden under Priya's bed rail. The one connected directly to the nurse's station. I didn't smile. Some secrets aren't worth keeping. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Rohan did something unexpected. He laughed. It started as a chuckle, then grew into something wild and unhinged. The gun wavered in his grip as his shoulders shook. The officers tensed, fingers tightening on their triggers. You're right, he said, wiping his eyes. They're not. Then he turned the gun on himself. The shot echoed in the small room long after. He hit the floor. The sound of the gunshot still rang in my ears as chaos erupted around me. Someone screamed, maybe it was me. The police officers rushed forward, shouting commands that blurred together into meaningless noise. Priya's nails dug into my arm hard, enough to draw blood as we both stared at Rowan's body sprawled on the hospital floor, the gun still clutched in his lifeless hand. A dark pool spreading beneath his head. My mother stood frozen in the doorway, her face as white as the hospital walls. For the first time in my life, I saw her perfect composure completely shattered. Her lips moved soundlessly, forming words that wouldn't come. The engagement ring on my finger suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The next few hours passed in a nightmarish blur. Police questioning, medical staff checking on Priya, endless cups of terrible coffee that did nothing to steady my shaking hands. Through it all, my mother sat silently in a corner chair, staring at her own hands as if she'd never seen them before. It wasn't until late that night, after Priya had finally been given sedatives to sleep and the police had left with their final warnings about not leaving town, that my mother finally spoke. He was her son, she whispered. The words hung in the stale hospital air between us. I waited, my entire body tense. Sunita's son, she continued, her voice barely audible. I knew she was pregnant, but I thought she'd gotten rid of it. Her hands twisted in her lap. When your father found out she'd kept the baby, he wanted to bring him into our family, to raise him alongside you girls. The image made me physically ill. Rohan, growing up in our home, playing with us, eating at our table, all while knowing the truth. You couldn't let that happen, I said flatly. Her head jerked up, her eyes burning with sudden intensity. Do you have any idea what that would have done to us? The scandal? The humiliation? She took a shuddering breath. I gave her money, enough to disappear, to raise the boy somewhere far away. But she didn't take it. No, my mother's lips pressed into a thin line. She went to your father instead, threatened to go public if he didn't leave us. A bitter smile twisted her mouth. So I made sure. She understood what would happen if she did. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. You ruined her. I protected my family. The outburst startled both of us. She lowered her voice with visible effort. I did what any mother would do. I thought of the poisoned wine, of her calm expression as Priya collapsed. No, I said quietly. You didn't. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Normal hospital sounds that now felt surreal, disconnected from the nightmare we were living. After a long moment, my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. Her hands shook as she held it out to me. I found this in your father's things after he died, she said. I thought about burning it. God knows I should have. I took the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed with age. My father's familiar handwriting made my throat tighten. Mira, my darling girl, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And the truth has finally come out. I have failed you in so many ways, but most of all by keeping this secret. You have a brother, a bright, beautiful boy named Rohan. He deserves to know his family, just as you deserve to know the truth about yours. I beg you, find him, love him, forgive me. The date at the bottom was 2 days before his car accident. I looked up at my mother, tears blurring my vision. You knew, all this time you knew. She didn't deny it. When that boy showed up at your office party last year, introduced himself as your new client, a shudder ran through her. I thought it was a sick joke at first. Then I realized he knew exactly who you were, who I was, and you did nothing. What would you have had me do? She snapped. Welcome him with open arms? After everything? I thought of Rowan's smile, his laugh, the way he'd kiss me for the first time under the stars on his balcony. All of it calculated. All of it lies. You could have told me the truth. The words seemed to deflate her. She sagged in her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 60 years. And lose you forever? I couldn't. The irony was almost funny. In trying so hard not to lose me, she destroyed any chance we had at a real relationship. The mother I'd loved and respected had never really existed, just like the man I'd promised to marry. Priya stirred in her sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. We both turned to look at her, my baby sister, caught in the crossfire of a war she never asked to join. I'm sorry about the wine, my mother said quietly. I never meant don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Just don't. She flinched but nodded. For a long time, we sat there in silence, watching Priya breathe, listening to the steady beep of her heart monitor. Two strangers, bound together by blood and betrayal. Finally, my mother stood, smoothing her wrinkled sari with trembling hands. I should go. The police will want to question me again in the morning. I didn't look up as she walked to the door, didn't say goodbye. But just as she reached the threshold, something made me call out, Did you love him? She paused, her back stiff. Who? Papa. Despite everything, did you ever really love him? The silence stretched so long I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, so softly I almost missed it. Not enough, and far too much. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the ghost of a brother I'd never really known. Outside, the first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day beginning, a life to somehow rebuild from the ruins. I looked down at the engagement ring still on my finger, a perfect circle of diamonds and lies. With hands that didn't shake, I twisted it off and dropped it into the trash can beside Priya's bed. It landed with a quiet, final clink. Somewhere in the city, Rowan's body lay cold in a morgue drawer. Somewhere in her penthouse, my mother sat alone with her regrets. And here I was, caught between them, the living proof of how far love could twist into something ugly. Priya murmured in her sleep again, her brow furrowed like she was having a bad dream. I reached out and smoothed her hair back from her forehead, the way our mother used to when we were small. It's okay, I whispered. I'm here. The words felt hollow even as I said them, but they were a start. The funeral was a quiet affair. No grand procession, no crowds of mourners. Just a simple cremation for a man who had been a stranger to most, a villain to some, and a brother to me in the cruelest twist of fate. I stood at the back of the crematorium, watching as the flames consumed Rowan's body, turning flesh and bone to ash. The scent of burning sandalwood and ghee filled the air, mixing with the acrid tang of something darker beneath. Priya stood beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly, It hurt. She had been released from the hospital just 2 days prior, still weak but determined to come for closure, she had said. But as I watched the smoke curl toward the sky, I wasn't sure closure was something we would ever truly find. My mother didn't attend. The police investigation had been swift. With Rohan's suicide and the evidence he left behind, the switched wine, the recorded conversations, the damning letter, the case was quickly closed. No charges were filed against my mother, though the truth of what she had tried to do hung between us like a blade waiting to fall. We hadn't spoken since that night in the hospital. The priest chanted the final prayers, his voice rising and falling in a rhythm meant to guide the soul to peace. I wondered where Rohan's soul would go, if there was a place for those who loved and destroyed in equal measure. When it was over, Priya and I walked out into the brittle winter sunlight. The world outside the crematorium walls felt too bright, too loud, too alive. Cars honked, children laughed, a street vendor called out prices for his fruit. Life went on, indifferent to our grief. We should go home, Priya said softly. I nodded, but didn't move. Home. The word felt foreign now. The apartment I had shared with Rohan had been emptied, his belongings boxed away. My mother's house was no longer an option. Even my office, the one place I had always found solace in blueprints and clean lines, felt tainted. Priya squeezed my hand. Not that home, she said, as if reading my thoughts. Mine. She had moved into a small flat near the university last year, a place she had proudly called her own. I had only visited once before, back when life was still simple, back when I still believed in the future Rohan had painted for us. Okay, I whispered. We took a taxi in silence, the weight of the morning pressing down on us. Priya's apartment was exactly as I remembered, cozy, cluttered, alive with color. Books piled on the coffee table, a half-finished painting propped against the wall, the faint scent of jasmine incense lingering in the air. It was nothing like the sleek, minimalist space Rohan had designed for us. It felt real. Priya busied herself making tea, the familiar clatter of cups a small comfort. I sank onto her couch, staring at my hands. They looked the same as they always had, same slender fingers, same faint scar on my thumb from a childhood accident. But they felt different, like they belonged to someone else. Priya returned with 2 steaming mugs. Here. I took mine, letting the warmth seep into my palms. Do you think he ever loved me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Priya hesitated, then sat beside me. I think he loved the idea of you, she said carefully. Of us. Of the family he never had. I swallowed hard. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the truth. Rohan had loved me as part of his revenge, as part of his twisted justice. And yet, there were moments, I said, staring into my tea, when he'd laugh at something stupid I said, or when he'd bring me coffee exactly how I liked it without me asking. In those moments, it felt real. Priya didn't reply. She didn't have to. We both knew that the worst betrayals weren't the ones made of hatred, but the ones wrapped in something that almost looked like love. The silence stretched, comfortable this time. Outside, the sun dipped lower, painting the walls in gold. What now? Priya finally asked. I set my tea down and took a deep breath. Now, I said, we live. It sounded impossible, but as I looked at my sister alive, breathing, here I realized it was the only thing left to do. The past couldn't be undone, the lies couldn't be unspoken, but somewhere beyond the wreckage of all we had lost, there was still a future waiting, and this time, I would walk into it with my eyes wide open.